on Power Talk AM 1460 and FM 101.1. Streaming worldwide on iHeartRadio. Jan Price talks to the movers and shakers in the film business. The Jan Price Show.
You're listening to The Jan Price Show, and my guest today, and I'm so excited to have her here, is documentary filmmaker and daughter of renowned actor Paul Henreid, Monica Henreid. Lovely to have you here, Monica.
Thank you, Jan. My pleasure.
I've been looking forward to this interview for a long, long time. Just to disclose, Monica and I met in the ladies' room at the Turner Classic Movies Film Festival last year, and we started chatting, and I knew then I wanted to have you on the show. You always meet the most interesting people in the ladies' room, don't you?
Oh, always, especially at the Hollywood Roosevelt. What could be more classic Hollywood than that?
Exactly. Well, you have been busy working on a documentary about your father, and as I said to you, I was homesick with the flu, and all I did was watch old movies, and I had recorded many of your father's films, and just, loved each and every one of them. But let's talk a little bit about, because I think it was Train to Munich, or was it Midnight Train to Munich, or Night Train to Munich?
Close enough. Night Train to Munich.
Night Train to Munich. He had a much longer name. So let's talk a little bit about how and when he shortened his name.
Well, if you really want to start with that, we have to go back just a little bit farther when on his birth certificate it actually says his name is Paul von Henreid Ritter von Fesel-Holdingau.
Wow.
So that on a marquee would be, ridiculous. So he became Paul von Henreid, and then after doing the films in London and also actually appearing on the stage there, it was thought again it needed to be, shall we say, less Germanic sounding, because that was indeed the late 30s, 38, 39. And then by the time he came to the United States, of course, they wanted to Americanize it even more. But, I mean, still to this day, I'm having to explain to people how to pronounce it or how to spell it, and it's really, it's all okay. It's all okay. We all go through changes.
Yes. So tell us a little bit about his career, how he got started in the film industry.
Well, he actually got started in the theater. That was his main love as a young man. When asked by his mother and uncles what he wanted to do with his life when he graduated from the equivalent of high school, was that he said he wanted to be a doctor. And of course, the uncles, who were all bankers, said, well, that's out of the question because it's too expensive and you're not a good enough student. So what else do you want to do? And he said, well, I want to be an actor. And they said, don't be ridiculous. We've never had one in the family and we never will. And then what else would you like to do? And he said, well, I think I love books. So anything that has to do with books. So he took a job as an apprentice for a publishing house in Vienna, and eventually was making enough money where he could pay for theater classes, which then led to him joining the actual theater conservatory in Vienna. And out of that, as they say, one thing leads to another. He had the opportunity to go and work with Reinhardt. That led to him doing plays in Vienna, starting his career actually in his early 20s, and getting, bit parts in movies, and then slowly but surely getting better and bigger parts. And that actually ultimately that sort of combination of theater and film took him to London, and the parts in the English films, British films, of course, were much bigger and better, and got him some recognition in film. So it's like everybody's career, it starts in one place and grows and grows and grows. He never lost his love for doing theater. He always, whenever he had the opportunity, even until the 1970s, he went back and did theater. He did Don Juan in Hell. So, and then, he would do guest appearances on television shows and things like that. And he did a few films, too. But by then, he was directing more than doing anything else.
He decided to move from in front of the camera to behind the camera. What made him transition into becoming a director?
Pretty much being blacklisted for the third time in his life.
Wow.
And that was because of the House. He was a member of the Committee for the First Amendment, and the backlash from that literally cut him off from work from all of the major studios in Hollywood. They would not touch him. So he had to go to work in independent films, and that allowed him to, since they couldn't pay him his full salaries in these smaller companies, he was just, graying the area, so to speak. I mean, he got more involved in looking at the financing of the film. He got more involved in looking at the producing end of a film. He got more involved in what it takes to be a director. And it sort of organically evolved, which, of course, worked out pretty well for all of us.
That's great. But where else was he blacklisted? You said he was blacklisted 3 times.
The first time was in Austria, Germany, by Goebbels, who he was going to take a contract at UFA, and when he found out he had to sign with the National Socialist German Film Guild, he said no, and he sort of threw that back in their face, and then they got very unhappy about it. They blacklisted him from doing film. They were actually taking his name off of films he'd already done.
Wow.
Then when he went to England and he was beginning to have a success, it was, like I said, the end of the 30s, and that was not a good time to have a number one Germanic name or to be an Austrian in England. So he was considered an enemy alien first class, and he and my mother were going to be separated and either deported or sent to detention camps. And he couldn't work in England anymore, and an American producer had seen him in one of the plays and then agreed to sign him and bring him to the United States to do theater on Broadway.
So he did not have to be split up from your mother then?
No. Their whole story is a Hollywood movie. You couldn't write this. What they experienced, what they went through in their young years, and because they were in their 20s. They were in their late 20s when all of this was happening.
Let's talk. Well, I do want to talk about your parents' relationship and get into it, because there's so few marriages in Hollywood that last us a lifetime like theirs did, but also to surviving being blacklisted in 3 different times in 3 different countries is kind of amazing, and overcoming that too. So, do you want to talk a little bit more about how that affected him, the being blacklisted, how it affected him, not only just his career, but just how it affected him on a personal level?
Yeah, there's nothing fun about rejection, even though you get quite accustomed to it as an actor, because, what is the product you're selling? You're selling yourself.
Right.
So there is an element of taking every one of those rejections personally, but I think when you do it on such a grand scale, where you're being told that you can no longer work in the industry of your choice in the country in which you live or in the city within which you live, and both, actually, it's a bit overwhelming. Lucky for him that he did meet my mother, and that they did literally fall in love, as in romantically in love. She came from a family of artists. She came from a family of playwrights, and my grandfather, her father, was the director of the Kunsthistorische Museum in Vienna for 30 years. So he not only got a wonderful girlfriend and then wife, but he got a whole family that could support him and understand him and help him get through these really, really dark times.
How
but
wonderful.
It did, yes. I would say yes. He very much was hurt by this, and being a sensitive person in the first place, he did take it personally. But again, she was always there to encourage him, and she'd always tell him, yes, we're going to get through this, and we're going to make it happen, and whatever you want to do with your career, we're all here to support you.
Wow. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
That's what everybody needs, especially in the arts. Go ahead.
Absolutely.
So how did they meet? And can you talk a little bit about their relationship? Because it was a love story.
Absolutely a love story. They each went to private school. She had gone to an all-girls school. He went to an all-boys school.
In Vienna? And this is in Vienna?
In Vienna, yes, in Vienna. And they had met probably when they were in their mid-teens, but they had met sort of only in passing. And years later, I think it might have been the opening night of a play he was in with the Reinhardt company. One of his friends said, "Oh, we've got to go to this, after party," and he didn't want to go, and whatever. Anyway, the friend convinced him to go and actually got him a blind date, and off they went to this party. And across the room, literally, there's my mother with her date, who she probably wasn't very happy with either. And when they did meet eye to eye and then start talking to each other, they realized that they had met when they were teenagers. And both of them not being happy at this particular party, my father said, "Well, I think I have to go now." And my mother said, "Okay, I'll give you a ride. I have a car." So the two couples got in the car. My mother dropped off her date, dropped off my father's date, and went to the top of the Kobenzl, which is a beautiful hill at the edge of the Vienna woods, and danced and drank champagne and talked for the rest of the night, never even noticing that the sun was coming up over the city of Vienna, and literally never parted each other's company for the next almost 60 years.
Wow.
That's a love story.
That is a love story. I love it. I love love stories too. So, in your documentary, which you're working on, is that an integral part of the documentary, their relationship?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think, honestly, he would not have succeeded were it not for her encouragement, for her patience and her love, and again, her family, because she surrounded him. Her family cushioned him from everything that was bad and difficult and heartbreaking. They were all there to support, even to the point where when my parents were living in Los Angeles, my father, who had had some success in film rather quickly, could afford to bring her parents and other members of the family over to the United States and actually buy them a house in Santa Monica. So they were all together again.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
Really nice.
So you grew up with your grandparents nearby then?
Yes.
That's wonderful too.
Not my father's parents. My father's father passed away during the First World War, and my father's mother, though she was given the choice and did come and visit us quite, I wouldn't say frequently, but a few times that I remember from my childhood, she chose to go live with her younger son, my father's younger brother, and they lived in South Africa.
Oh, nice. Did you ever go over there to visit?
I didn't. I wish the opportunity had arisen, but they traveled and visited us. I did meet my uncle, and I did meet my grandmother.
That's nice. If you are just listening, if you're just tuning in, and you are listening to the Jan Price Show all about movies, and my guest today is Monica Henreid, and she is a documentary filmmaker and the daughter of famous film actor Paul Henreid, and we're talking about her father's career today. So he came over to America via this. Was it a producer, you said, or a director who had seen
yes,
and
a producer.
A producer. So what happened once he reached America?
Well, another, one of those moments, and again, this is why I keep saying, this is why this story is so amazing. Somehow he was always in the right place at the right time and the wrong place at the wrong time. So there were either great highs or great lows in his career and his life. He was being brought to Broadway to appear opposite Helen Hayes. And when he arrived, and they literally were very, very limited as to what they could bring because it was during the war, and it was, for whatever reason, Europeans, especially, again, Austrians or Germans, were being held at bay a bit. When they arrived, they had a very limited amount of money, and the assumption was, though I don't know that there was a written contract, there might have been a limited contract. They were put up in a nice hotel, and then within 24, 48 hours found out that Helen Hayes' schedule had changed and was not available to do this play, and then he would just have to wait. And again, my mother, with all of her spirit, said, well, okay, fine, I'll find an apartment, I'll get a job. She was a couturier designer and a costume designer in Europe and had a fabulously successful career on her own. Hence, she could afford to buy her own automobile.
Wow.
which had made its definite impression on my father. And, it was one of those moments where it was really her turn, so to speak. And she said, okay, I'm going to go. I'll get a job. I'll find us an apartment. What she didn't tell him was that she was literally taking all of the money that they had and spending it on 1 month on the most expensive apartment in the best neighborhood that she could find in New York City. Whatever other change they had was enough for food. And That was it. And my father absolutely panicked. What are you doing? What are you thinking? My English is not American enough. They're not going to understand what I'm saying. Nobody's going to give me a job. I don't know what's going to happen. She just stopped him dead in his tracks and said, you'll have a job in less than 30 days, and then we can afford to stay here. And she was right.
I love it.
She was absolutely right. She found a job for herself so that they would have a small income. I don't remember the name of the designer, but somewhere on Fifth Avenue, quite posh, because, like I said, her reputation had preceded her. And they lived in this apartment rather beautifully, and he went to a couple of auditions, all of which went quite poorly. And then he went and met with Elmer Rice, who had written a play called Flight to the West, which would star his wife, Betty Field, and a couple of young punks that hadn't done anything or much of anything before. One was Carl Malden.
Oh, my goodness.
The other one was Hugh Marlowe, who also became lifelong friends with my parents, of course. And my father went to this audition and had read the pages that he was supposed to read for Elmer Rice, and apparently was not well taken by them. He didn't like them at all. And when he did sit in front of Mr. Rice to make his audition, he said, it's really hard for me to say these things because this is not how a Nazi speaks. And I thought, the first time I heard this story about my father, I kind of laughed, and then I thought about it, and I went, yeah, he has that kind of, it's not really arrogance, but this kind of confidence that he knows what he knows. He had spent enough years dealing with Nazis. He had spent enough time playing Nazis, and he always wanted to prove to the audiences that Nazis were not all heavy-handed thugs. They were educated, sharp, charming, very often people. And that's what he wanted to play. So you could see that there would be a reason that people could get caught up in these stories and beliefs, this unfortunate time in our history, but that that it was possible that people would believe the propaganda that Nazis would spread. So Mr. Rice said to him, well, do you think you can write it better? And my father said, yes. All right, you have the weekend to rewrite what you think, write or make the notes accordingly, and then bring it on, come back on Monday. And he did that. And as they say, the rest is history, because he got the role and he played the role on Broadway. And
what was the play? What was the name of the play?
Flight to the West.
Flight to the West?
Right, Flight to the West.
Flight to the West.
And the beauty, again, of the coincidence and the cosmos working in one's favor after all of the difficult times that they had together. The same time that he was in this play on Broadway, Night Train to Munich opened literally a block and a half away.
Wow.
So from being completely unknown, he went to having his name on two marquees in New York City simultaneously.
Wow. How exciting.
Yeah, that's amazing.
How exciting. So how long was he in the play?
I think the play ran in 2 increments, and it was done through the Writers Guild, I believe. I'm sorry, I don't have that at my fingertips right now. But
that's all right.
They had it was successful enough where they could move it to another. When the one run finished, they moved it to another theater. It was quite well received. It was, again, one of those plays that was difficult because it did deal with Nazis, and it did deal with propaganda, and it wasn't Annie Get Your Gun. It wasn't Hello Dolly. It was a very somber think piece.
Did he ever do the play with Helen Hayes?
No.
Never. That never happened.
That never happened. That never happened.
And she's such an amazing stage actress in particular.
Indeed.
So, yeah.
Yes.
So where did he go from there? So he did this play, and he had the night train to Munich, and they
and was spotted by a talent agent, I believe, from RKO originally, who again they brought them out to Hollywood, to Beverly Hills. Put them up at the Beverly Hills Hotel for a film to star with Ginger Rogers, and he was upside down and inside out happy because she had won the Oscar, and he thought that would just be the best, jumping off point for a Hollywood career. And after, I think, again, 24 hours at the Beverly Hills Hotel, the agent said, no, Ginger Rogers is not going to do the film.
Oh. What was the film?
So once again, my mother to the rescue.
What was the film? Do you know the name? Do you remember the name of the film?
I don't.
Okay.
I think it may have been Joan of Paris, which is what he ultimately ended up doing.
Okay.
Or it may have been something else in between.
Okay.
I don't actually know. But anyway, he when he went to the studio, they were to introduce him to Michelle Morgan, and he just thought to himself, great, terrific, a Hollywood premiere role for us, a French girl and an Austrian. That what chance have we got of having careers? That didn't seem it wasn't seemly that would be a good way to start a career. He thought it should be opposite someone who was already established in Hollywood. Ultimately, it didn't work out badly at all. They both had very nice careers.
And that's Joan of Paris?
Joan of Paris with Michelle Morgan.
With
yes.
Michelle Morgan. Wow. So you said your mother, I'm sorry, I interrupted you, but you said your mother kind of stepped up and at what point was that? I mean, what did she do? What did she do when she stepped up again?
She was doing it all the time. Because she had to, because his career would rise, and then something would happen, and he was supposedly moving on to the next step, and as soon as he got to whatever the next step was, something would collapse, something would be pulled out from under him, and she would be there one more time saying, no, it's just another stupid, stepping stone, and we'll get through it, and it'll be okay. And he's saying, well, we'll go somewhere else or go back to New York, and she's saying no. She was always the one to, that expression, the wind beneath his wings.
Yeah.
That was her. That's who she was.
Wow.
And they were intellectually on the same level. They were artistically on the same level. They were, for many years, financially on the same level. There were a lot of reasons why their relationship worked for a long time.
Truly amazing. Well, I am looking forward. You're so fascinating, and I want to hear more about your father's career for sure. So we have a lot more to talk about. So we're going to have you back on the show for part 2. So we thank you for being on the show, Monica.
My pleasure.
And thank you so much, Monica. You're welcome.
Thank you, Jan.
You're welcome. Go to the Jan Price Show on Facebook to learn about upcoming shows. And while you're there, like my page. And to listen to the Price Movie Minute movie reviews and to listen to archive shows that you may have missed, go to thejanpriceshow.com.
On Power Talk AM 1460 and FM 101.1, streaming worldwide on iHeartRadio. Jan Price talks to the movers and shakers in the film business. The Jan Price Show.
Hi, this is Rich Little. Join me in beautiful Carmel by the Sea the weekend of March the 29th and 30th to celebrate the legendary Doris Day's 97th birthday. Enjoy a 60th anniversary screening of Pillow Talk with film host Ben Makowitz and Q&A with Doris's co-stars Jackie Joseph, Peter Marshall, and me, and a special concert by Michael Feinstein. Auctions, raffle, dog adoptions, and more. Proceeds benefit the Doris Day Animal Foundation. Hey, I'll even bring along Doris's leading men like Clark Gable, Jimmy Stewart, or Cary Grant. Visit DorisDayAnimalFoundation.org for tickets and more information.
Power Talk AM 1460 and FM 101.1, streaming worldwide on iHeartRadio. Jan Price talks to the movers and shakers in the film business. The Jan Price Show.
You're listening to the Jan Price Show, and my guest today is Monica Henreid, and she is a documentary filmmaker and the daughter of the famous actor Paul Henreid. And I'm so happy to have you back on the show. We had so much to talk about last week. We decided to do a second show with Monica. So, Monica, when we talked last week, we were just talking about he had just done Joan of Paris with Michelle Morgan. Tell me a little bit, how was the success of that movie?
Well, I think it did well. It did well. Shall I say the best news is that it is a film that Bette Davis happened to see. And when Warner Brothers was actually struggling to find someone to play opposite her in Now Voyager, she said, well, why don't you go look at this young guy who just did Joan of Paris? So they brought him over to Warner Brothers and caked him with makeup and slicked down his hair and put him in a ridiculous jacket with big shoulder pads and so on and so forth. And he did the screen test, and luckily Betty saw it and said, who's that? And they said, well, that's the guy you wanted us to bring over from RKO. And she said, no, that's not him at all, not even. But if you're telling me it's that same human being, well, then you have to test him again. You have to take off the makeup, have him wash his hair, get him out of the stupid clothes. So that was it. I mean, she was really the one who was behind. She was the force behind getting him the job at Warner Brothers, and ultimately the contract and working opposite her in Now Voyager.
And it's one of my favorite movies. I love Now Voyager. I just watched it again last week, and I just loved it. All right, so let's talk about the famous scene lighting the 2 cigarettes. There's a story behind that, I'm sure.
Oh, do they light 2 cigarettes? I don't remember.
Umpteen million times. I forgot how many times I should have counted it.
I just want you to know, Jan, that this is not the most original question I have ever been asked.
I'm sure. I'm sure. Sorry.
However, I will answer it again.
It's a different audience.
My mother and my father smoked cigarettes. And when they took road trips, which they loved to do, because I believe I mentioned my mother had her own car in Austria, and they loved just leaving the city and going to Salzburg or Innsbruck for a long weekend or whatever have you. Whenever they drove, because it was a standard shift, whoever was actually physically driving the car couldn't light the cigarette. So whoever was in the navigator seat would take out 2 cigarettes, light them both, and pass it over to the driver. If my mother was driving, my father would do it. If my father was driving, my mother would do it. It was just habit. Apparently, something like this had appeared in other films. People have mentioned that to me. And it is actually in the book, the Prouty book, Now Voyager, that there is a sequence about exchanging cigarettes. But when it was put into the script and it was then attempted, it reads fine. But when you actually tried to do the way it was written in the script, it became all arms and cigarettes back and forth, and it was awkward and uncomfortable, and my father and Betty just couldn't resolve how to get it done. So at the end of that day, my father, when he got home, was exhausted and grumpy. And this is, stories being told me because I wasn't born yet. But this was something that annoyed him. Let's put it that way. So after describing his unhappy day to my mother, she simply said, "Why don't you just do what we do?" And the next morning, when he arrived on the set, he showed Betty the suggestion of this old habit that he and my mother had shared for years. She loved it. They went to Irving Rapper, who was the director, showed it to him. He hated it. Betty one-upmanshiped him and called Hal Wallace, who was the producer on the film. Hal Wallace loved it. It worked. It was easy. It was comfortable. And to the point where Hal Wallace liked it so much, he actually had that piece of business written into the script more often. It was actually only there once, and it now ends up being 4 or 5 times, I think.
Well, I read when doing some research for this that Irving Rapper wanted it, almost cut it out of the film.
Oh, yeah. I would say the relationship between my father, Betty, and Irving Rapper was not cool. there was not a lot of I don't know if respect is the right word. It was personality differences, and Betty, who was a gang of her own, had my father to support her in her thoughts and beliefs as to how certain scenes should be played. Betty also supported my father, and again, as I said, he had great confidence and would say, no, this character would approach it this way, or this is more natural for him to do. She supported him, so Irving Rapper kind of got, I won't say pushed aside, but he was sort of third man on the totem pole. Which is not usually a comfortable place for a director. The director likes to be, top of the totem pole.
Right. But when you have the producer who's, obviously oversees everything behind the two stars, then that makes it, even more that formidable. And, well, Betty Davis was a force of her own. No question about it. Pretty much.
Was great.
Yeah.
I loved her. I just loved her.
Did you have a chance to meet her through the years?
She was like a second mother.
Oh, my gosh. Tell me about that. I love her.
Knew her or got to know her very well my parents and Betty became very, very good friends because of Now Voyager, and their friendship lasted until she passed away, which was 48 years, 46 years or something like that. They were good friends. When she was on the West Coast, she would come to our house very often, lunches, dinners, talks well into the evening. We would go to her home. Oh, well, my parents, being European, didn't have tremendous, Thanksgiving didn't have tremendous significance for them. And the idea of my father eating a turkey was just so out of the question that I don't think we ever even had a turkey in our house ever for any reason. But Betty, being the all-American American, that New Englander with all that spirit, we would go to her house for Thanksgiving dinner. And it would be the whole family and everybody else's families. It was usually, probably 20 adults and almost as many children. And it would be a true Thanksgiving meal. I mean, that's how I learned about Thanksgiving.
Wow. What was she like?
She was great. She was absolutely great. Absolutely. Like you say, she was a force of her own. She was phenomenal. If she was your friend, that's about the only friend you needed. I mean, she was just amazing. An amazing, amazing woman. Confident and yet gentle and sweet and there are no words. I just loved her to pieces.
Well, to me, she's one of the greatest actresses that ever lived, especially during that era. Yeah. Sorry, say that again.
I said, that too.
Oh, that too. Yes, I know. Yeah. Meryl Streep for this generation, and Betty Davis for that generation, and I know that Betty Davis was an inspiration to Meryl Streep and always has been too. And she has been an inspiration to many actors, and there were so many great actresses from that era. I mean, Barbara Stanwyck, and I mean, just many. Didn't they do another film together? Your father and Betty Davis? Did they do another film?
As co-stars. As co-stars, they did another film called Deception.
Oh, Deception, that's right.
Yeah, and that didn't work out well for Irving Rapper either, who was their director.
He directed that one too. Okay.
Yeah.
I saw that one too when I was homesick in bed, so I did see it. Yeah, it wasn't as good.
Yeah, but the film belongs. I mean, Betty and my father aside, they're wonderful together, and it's always fun watching them together.
Yes.
But that film belongs to Claude Rains.
Yes.
Absolutely belongs to Claude Rains.
Yeah.
He chose the scenery in that like no one else's business. I mean, and the three of them together, and the sequences that the three of them are together, you can see it. It's in the eyes, the way they look at each other, the way well, again, that's acting. That's what it's called.
Right.
And luckily, again, Irving Rapper backed off as necessary and just let these three professionals go at each other. So, for instance, the sequence in the restaurant is just priceless. And it's not just that Claude Rains is having more fun than any actor should ever have, but watching how my father and Betty are watching him and watching each other and back and forth. I mean, it's just priceless. He is just brilliant in that film. Superb actor in the first place, but just for me in Deception, he owns it. That's his.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, you could just see he was relishing his role, and it brought the three of them back together again too.
It did,
you know.
yes.
And then we move on to the iconic role of Victor Laszlo in Casablanca, which I again watched again for the umpteenth time. Again with Claude Rains and your father. Talk a little bit about that. How did he get that role, and how did he feel about that role?
How did he get that role? He was there. He was under contract at Warner Brothers. He was across the alley shooting Now Voyager. I mean, that's it.
That was it?
There. Yeah, he was there. And actually, he turned it down. He didn't want to do it.
And why? Why did he turn it down, Monica?
Well, because he had now had 2 films under his belt where he was the leading man opposite the leading lady. And it was only their 2 names above the title. And placement like that is really very important and very significant. Mm-hmm. And when he originally read what was given him as Victor Laszlo, it was a smaller part. It was maybe closer to the way it had been done in the play originally. Excuse me. Where there's a lot of time spent talking about Victor Laszlo, but you don't get to see Victor Laszlo. You don't get to meet Victor Laszlo. So his agent by then, fortunately, was Lou Wasserman, who also ended up having a pretty good show business career.
Yes, he did. Yes.
And the 2 of them sort of figured out a way to just say, look, if you want Mr. Henreid to be the 3rd actor in this, and you want him to be he's actually the co-star. His character is actually the co-star to Rick and Ilsa. So therefore, his name needs to be above the title. And clearly he has to, walk away with Ilsa in the end. So those 2 things were negotiated to whatever point. My father had a terrible cold. He and Claude Rains both had colds at the end of Now Voyager, and were not feeling well at all. But a contract is a contract. I don't think they held production on Casablanca for Claude Rains, but they did hold my father's scenes closer to the end of the shooting schedule of Casablanca because Bogey had a previous commitment. He had to be finished by a certain day. So it was a typical Hollywood. And for anybody working on the film, it was a job. Mm-hmm. Nobody suspected that it would reach the ranks of fame and popularity that it has. It was a job. They were doing their jobs. They were showing up, learning their lines, showing up, hitting their marks, and doing the best they could. And that was another one of those sets where there was something new every day, blue pages every day, things being rewritten. My father and Bogey and Claude Rains and a few other actors getting very disgruntled with Michael Curtiz and but what do we have as a result? We have a masterpiece.
Yeah, it's a masterpiece. It's always listed as one of the best movies ever made. So,
exactly.
It's always on the top of the list. If you are just tuning in and you are listening to the Jan Price Show all about movies, and my guest today is the lovely Monica Henreid, and she is is a filmmaker and the daughter of famous film actor Paul Henreid, and we are just having such a good time talking about your father's career. So how was it for your father after? I mean, was it very as successful when it came out as it over the years? Literally when we watch the movie, we know all the lines, we can say them all out loud. I mean, was that the reaction to people had when that movie came out? Do you know?
Well, again, stories having been told around the dinner table, I think it was popular. I don't think it was phenomenal. I don't think it was what you call now a blockbuster by any means. But it did well at the box office. The timing of the release was perfection because it hit the headlines just when the Casablanca conference was, all over the newspaper. And prior to that, in November, the Operation Torch was all over the newspaper, which also was relative to Morocco and Casablanca. So Warner Brothers did a good marketing thing with that, taking advantage of that. So I think it was very well received. It wasn't overwhelming, but it was popular. It actually got popular during the time of when television came about, and suddenly there was the demand for 24-hour television programming, and the stations themselves couldn't possibly afford to make enough product to cover 24 hours, and someone came up with the idea, well, all these old studios have all these old movies, I bet we can get them cheap. And they did. And so suddenly all of the middle of America that didn't get to see all of these films could watch them.
Right.
Any time of the day or night. And a lot of the shows ran the films, 5 or 7 nights in a row. So if you missed it on Monday, you could see it on Tuesday or Thursday or Friday or Saturday, or you wanted to see it again, you could see it as many times as you wanted within a week, because it would play for an entire week on these television channels across the country.
Wow, amazing. How do you think, or why do you think it developed this legendary status that it has? And it keeps growing. It seems like every year it keeps growing. The mythology around Casablanca.
Yeah. Well, I know. This is one of those questions I've been asked a lot, and for me, the answer is integrity. It's the integrity of the characters. Everybody in the film does the right thing. Mm-hmm. They all behave properly. They all. It would be wrong. Well, first of all, the censors would never allow a married woman to stay behind with her lover and put her husband on an airplane and say goodbye. That would never happen in 1942.
Yeah.
But there's something about there are all sorts of layers of love. There's all sorts of different kinds of love. And at this particular time, in this particular film, love of principle, love of not companionship, I don't mean it in that way, but it was bigger than romantic love. And even Bogey's character, even Rick, goes off and implies that he's now, back, he's joining the fight, he's going to help the good guys win. Mm-hmm. He's going to go off with Louis, and they're going to figure out how to knock down the Nazis. Everybody, the principal characters that you care about, the people, you want them as your friends. You want Rick and Ilsa and Victor to be your friends, and Louis. You want to hang out with these guys.
Right.
And that has a tremendous influence on an audience. That's why people see this film over and over and over again, because it's like sitting down with your old friends. What is my old friend going to do? Well, we know what he's going to do. So what is he going to say? Well, we know what he's going to do. It doesn't matter. It's like it's comfortable. We love these guys.
Well, it's our comfort food. Maybe we need that more than ever in everything that's going on in the world today, and so many people who don't have integrity. It's like a foreign word anymore.
Absolutely.
Constantly we read about something somebody else has done that's totally out of integrity, and it's such an important, for me, it's just one of those important qualities to have in any of my friends, is that they have integrity. And so maybe that's why we resonate so much. You're right about this movie. You're correct when you say that. And I hadn't thought about it quite like that, but you're right. It is definitely that way. So what happened after Casablanca to your father's career? Because here he had 2 amazing, classic movies back to back that he's so well known for. What happened after that, Monica?
Well, he was at Warner Brothers. He still had, I think, a little bit of a contract with RKO. It was sort of a dual thing. He was originally contracted to RKO, then he went to Warner's. He got all of these films at Warner's. And he continued making them. However, he was right. It should have gone, Betty Davis, or Betty Davis, Barbara Stanwyck, Ginger Rogers. He should have stayed up there with all of the A ladies, just one-on-one. And his career kind of started, and I don't mean to say anything negative about any of the actresses he ever worked with. He worked with great actresses. He worked with Ida Lupino. He worked with Olivia de Havilland. He worked with Hedy Lamarr. So he stayed there, but the films themselves weren't quite the same fabulous quality. I mean, and again, I don't mean to say anything negative. It's just the way of the world, the way it was then. He wasn't really relegated to B pictures. I don't mean it that way, but it changed. Their perception of him changed, because he was no longer the number 1 leading man. He was the second guy to Bogey. And it changed the Hollywood perception of him.
Oh, that's too bad.
Switched his career. Well, again, good news, bad news. If he had continued doing what I'm suggesting didn't happen, and he could have gotten caught up in just playing the suave, romantic, charming leading man.
Right.
He was a trained actor. He never looked at himself as being just a good-looking leading man. He had learned fencing, he had learned body movement, he had learned singing, he had learned makeup, he had learned stage movement, he'd learned set design. He had gone to school to learn how to become an actor. So he wanted to use all of these skills he had. He didn't want to get pigeonholed. He didn't want to become a cliche, so to speak. So because of this and a few other things that happened also in his career later on, he went off. He came up with an idea and went over to RKO and said, look, I'm done with these kind of leading men. I really want to do something different. I want to be this. He actually took the idea to Jack Warner first. And Jack Warner said, yeah, well, look, if I want a swashbuckler, I've already got Errol Flynn. I don't need you. So he took the idea back to RKO, and RKO said, well, if we can develop this into a decent script, let's go for it. Let's try it. And he took it to Herman Mankiewicz, and a bottle of scotch later, there was a deal to write the script for The Spanish Main, which is just a fun, raucous, adventurous, beautifully photographed pirate picture. Sort of a, Robin Hood of the high seas or the Caribbean. It's just a frolic on the ocean with the most gorgeous woman with her flaming red hair, Maureen O'Hara, and a bunch of really gritty and great character actors. And it's fun. There's not too much to be taken seriously there. And Walter Slezak is the bad guy. I mean, oh, please, it's just delicious.
Well, we'll have to look for that one for sure.
And it's in color. It's the first Technicolor film that RKO made, so it got a lot of publicity. I think it was the biggest box office that RKO had that year.
You're kidding me. And
it was huge.
Wow.
And it was huge.
And that was the title of it again was?
The Spanish Main.
The Spanish Main. I think they're actually be running that on Turner Classic Movies this month. I think I saw.
Well, I hope they run it again and again because it is popular and people do enjoy it. You also get my father was very funny. He had a great sense of humor, and you do get to see that a little bit in The Spanish Main. And he was a terrific athlete. He played tennis every day. He swam every day. We would go horseback riding, bicycle riding, climbing, hiking.
Wow.
Running on the beach. I mean, he was a real physical guy. So for him to be able to show off a little bit in The Spanish Main, I think he enjoyed that.
Well, Monica, it has been such a pleasure talking to you. We could talk for hours and hours and hours. So I look forward to having you back on the show at another time. But thank you so much for the insights about your father and his career and your mother.
It's my pleasure, truly. And again, this is exactly why I'm making the documentary about him. Because his story, for as romantic and heroic as it is on film, his life story is the ups and downs, and the romance is much bigger and much more interesting.
I can't wait to see it. Thank you again.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Go to The Jan Price Show on Facebook to learn more about upcoming shows, and while you're there, please like my page, and to listen to the Price Movie Minute movie reviews, and to listen to archived shows that you may have missed, go to thejanpriceshow.com.
On Power Talk AM 1460 and FM 101.1, streaming worldwide on iHeartRadio. Jan Price talks to the movers and shakers in the film business. The Jan Price Show.
Hi, this is Rich Little. Join me in beautiful Carmel by the Sea the weekend of March the 29th and 30th to celebrate the legendary Doris Day's 97th birthday. Enjoy a 60th anniversary screening of Pillow Talk with film host Ben Mankiewicz and Q&A with Doris's co-stars Jackie Joseph, Peter Marshall, and me, and a special concert by Michael Feinstein. Auctions, raffle, dog adoptions, and more. Proceeds benefit the Doris Day Animal Foundation. Hey, I'll even bring along Doris's leading men like Clark Gable, Jimmy Stewart, or Cary Grant. Visit DorisDayAnimalFoundation.org for tickets and more information.